Hello, everyone. Welcome to our National Citizenship Services Day virtual event hosted by PALCUS. We are really happy to have you all with us today because we get lots and lots of questions about the citizenship process, and we will be addressing some very specific topics today that hopefully speak to a lot of the questions that we get. Presenters today are Sabrina Broom from Portugal Solutions, Monique Kelly-Valance from Marie B. Kelly and Associates, and Nelson Ponta from Becoming a Portuguese Citizen, and Sandra Carapinha from Learn European Portuguese Online. They will be addressing not only certain paths to citizenship, but also Sandra will be talking about the CPLE language test, which is the requirement for getting citizenship through grandparents. So we're going to move on to Sandra Carapinha's presentation, where she'll be talking in detail about the language test that is required for anyone applying through grandparents. So Sandra.
Hola, hi everybody. So I'll be sharing my presentation. Give me just a second. Can you see it? Yes?
Perfect.
Awesome. So I'll be talking about the CPLE exam, which is one of the requirements for Portuguese through grandparents. A little introduction, brief introduction about myself. So I am a Portuguese American. I was born in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and moved to Portugal, Caldas da Rainha, at age 9. Grew up in Portugal, went to college in Portugal, got married, had my kids, and in 2011 decided to move to California, back to the United States. And I started my project, Learn European Portuguese Online, where we focus on online teaching to try to reach as many people as possible with online, focusing mostly on online private lessons. And in the past 2-3 years, we've noticed a big increase of demand for lessons of CPLE prep. People wanted to know more about this exam and what they needed to know and how was it the structure of the exam. So we've been working on that, and now I'm very lucky to have several teachers in Portugal also on my team. And you probably know me from my YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel called Learn European Portuguese Online, with over 150 videos teaching Portuguese. So make sure to check it out if you're interested. And here, just very quickly, what we will be covering. I want to explain a little bit what is the CPLE, what does A2 level mean in language learning, how to enroll in this exam. That is a very important part to take note. What topics you need to know in terms of language learning, preparation tips, and when you're ready. And I'll explain a little bit what services we have that can help you prepare for the exam. So starting with language levels and very quickly, so the CPLE is an A2 level exam, and in Europe, languages are organized by these letters, okay? So A is a beginner's, it's what they call a basic user. B level would be an independent user, and C level is a proficient user. So basically, A2 means you're a basic 2 level, right? So it's a little bit over. So they divide it between A1 and A2. So you have to be this A2. And this exam that we've been talking about is run by an institute in Portugal that's called CPLE. A lot of people don't have an understanding that they think that it's connected to Instituto Camões. Instituto Camões does not run these exams. It's an independent institution that belongs to the Faculdade de Letras in Lisboa, in Lisbon. And while the Instituto Camões supports, especially also here in the US, supports a lot. Many times they are the ones that are the examiners at the exam in the different locations, but they do not run these exams. Okay, it's an independent institution called CPLE. And by the way, CPLE is just one of the exams, okay? So that's the name of the A2 level exam. If you're really into language learning, you'll have the B1 exam, the B2, the C1. So the A2 is the minimum requirement to get your citizenship. But if you love languages, you can learn more, okay? It doesn't stop at A2. So as I mentioned, the CPLE is the name of this exam of the A2, and it attests to a basic general ability to interact in a limited number of predictable everyday situations. And I'll be explaining a little bit further with giving some examples. So enrollment, costs, and exam dates, very important. Enrollment is done online on this CPLE link. I can also then give the direct link to Angela if you'd like to add it. The cost is 75 euros. And there are 2 international dates in the US. So you can take the exam in May and in November. If you decide to take the exam in Portugal, there are several other dates, at least 5 more throughout the year. If you want to take the exam in the US, it can be taken in Boston, Newark, Washington, D.C., and Berkeley in California. Highlighted here, international spots are very limited. So when enrollments open in January, so they open enrollments at the beginning of each year, make sure to add it to your calendar to go to that CPLE website every day, because spots, once they're placed online, they can go away in a day. So then you're stuck. If you want to take the exam in the US, you might not be able to take until next year. So it's very important. So I highly recommend that you get, organized. And also if you're from a state that does not have, a place to take the CPLE, it requires, getting hotel and flight. So you might have to, plan ahead this date. The exam structure. Let's talk about more practical things. So this is the time that you have. So the reading, and so basically they cover the 4 components, right, of language learning. So the reading, the writing, the listening, and the oral production and interaction. So the reading and the written you do it together in a block. You have 1 hour and 15 minutes to do this part, and it's worth 45% of the grade. The listening, which usually is the hardest part of the exam, is also worth the most. So it's 30% just for this component, and it takes 30 minutes. Now, this depends on your level of Portuguese. If you grew up speaking Portuguese and listening to Portuguese at home, you might be at an advantage, right? Because then maybe the listening might come easier. So the strengths and weaknesses of each student really depends if you were exposed to the language at home or not. Traditionally, a student of Portuguese as a heritage language will have different strengths from a person that's learning Portuguese from scratch. So be on the watch, right? So you have to study. You should study all 4 components anyway. And then you have the oral production and interaction, where it's pretty quick, 15 minutes. You have to speak about yourself. You need to describe usually an image, and then they're going to pair you with another student, and you have to do some kind of role play situation. And that part is video recorded and sent to Portugal. Grading to pass. So here's the good news. You can pass as long as you have 55% or more, okay? The truth, you do not have to pass in every component of the exam. So let's say you can have a 40% on the listening, but then you have to, of course, score higher on the other parts. Okay, so this is just the average score, and usually you'll know your grade about 2 months after the date of the exam. They'll place it also online. You'll have a code. You have your student code, and you just put the code on that CAPL website, and they'll let you know your grade. And then if you pass, you'll get, you can be in touch. If you're taking it in the United States, you can keep touch with the examiner. And I do think that in the US, they kind of, depending on where you live, you don't have to go in person to get your certificate, and they will mail it to you. If you take the exam in Portugal, you do have to have someone to go get your exam someone to get it in person where you took the exam. Okay. So if you go and take your exam in the Algarve, you have to make sure you have someone in the Algarve that can go and pick it up. They won't mail it. Okay, let's talk about the actual exam. They do have a sample, the official exam, model exam, also on the CAPL website. So I always recommend students to become familiar with the typology of questions and know what to expect. You might think, oh, I know how to speak Portuguese. I understand Portuguese. I even write some Portuguese. I'll just do the CPLE. It really requires some preparation, and you'll do much better if you know what to expect, what type of questions, how the structure is. So I highly recommend you just be aware of the exam. And when you feel ready, of course, depending if you're a total beginner, if not, so here is the other important thing to know is if you do not know any Portuguese, you should start learning. And Sabrina can then confirm this or not, but I always recommend you start learning Portuguese, maybe even before. It should probably be the first thing or one of the first things you should do even before you start looking for the documents. If you are a total beginner and you're trying to get citizenship through grandparents, you should start with the language because it is a long process. And it depends. Of course, some students know already Portuguese, but if you're a total beginner, you need to really commit to studying and, and creating the routine, the class routine, studying. It might take up to a year. And then you also have these issues with the dates. So you need to save that spot. And then it's important to do mock tests. I also recommend, so that's one of the things I will be launching, hopefully this weekend. We have several new projects that we've been working on to help with CPLE prep. And so we will be launching our mock tests for CPLE prep hopefully this weekend or Monday, the latest, where we prepared full sample tests, full tests for you to practice with audios, so students can then, have extra practice. So that's something if you're looking into. You can always start with a free one, of course, and then if you need more practice, we'll be launching more throughout the year. I do have a free sample test also that has one type of each exercise if you want to just have an idea. So you can also, and I'll also can give this link to Angela later. You can also download it, and I have audios for you to listen, just for you to have an idea of how the exam is. So what topics are covered on the CPLE? It's just important. This is really just for you to have an idea. But, you really have to know a little bit of everything, right? So you need to understand messages. You need to understand postcards. This is more regarding writing, for example. You need to know how to fill out forms. You need to know what morada means, what, nome, nacionalidade, all those if you were filling out a form. If you're checking in at a hotel, opening a bank account, registering. So you need to know all that information. Write informal texts, postcards, letters. So one of the you have two writing assignments. One is replying to a text message in about 20 or so words. So it can be an invitation, right? Somebody can say, "Olá, Joana, queres vir almoçar comigo? Do you want to have lunch with me?" Then you have to reply in 20 words and say, "Sí, claro, yes, of course. A que horas? Onde?" And you have to write that. So the response of a text message. Then you'll have the bigger chunk, let's say, of the second exercise of writing, which usually is a letter, okay? Can also be regarding an invitation or a lost item that you need to write a letter, like a note for lost and found. So it's a bigger chunk of text that can go up to over 60, 70 words pretty much. So you need to be familiar with also writing. And then here, be aware of any kind of signs that you see on the streets, roads, read timetables, public transportation. In the casa, you definitely need to know all your vocabulary regarding house, housing, if you're buying a house, if you're selling a house, if you're renting a room, know all that vocabulary. Anything regarding restaurants, ordering, menus, food, buying at the supermarket, all those things as well. Health, saúde, dialogues at the doctor, at the pharmacy, how to say if you're sick, if you have a headache. So there's a lot of topics that you will need to cover. Stores, of course, understand, you'll be able to buy, to exchange a product, understand the general information of when things are at the stores. And of course, meios de comunicação, which has to do with social media. So, with media, not social media. You have to understand, the headlines of newspapers, magazines. Is this a sports article? Is it an ad? So I always tell students, try to surround yourself as much as possible with Portuguese. So sign up for Portuguese newsletters, for Público, for Record, and put on some Portuguese podcasts. So really try, if you're in a Portuguese community, speak Portuguese to people, go to those festas. So preparation tips. It's very important to have a study plan from the beginning. So if you're aiming at taking the November exam next year, you think, okay, when do I start? What am I doing every week? You need to be very structured. I highly recommend you find a tutor. I know there are also group lessons, but the truth is, with a tutor, you'll learn at your pace. The problem with group lessons sometimes is that it either goes too fast for you or too slow. And students just don't thrive so well in that environment. If you have one-on-one lessons with a tutor, you learn much faster. Buy A2 level materials. There are a lot of books you can have and also work on your own. Create a timeline. And again, like I was saying, that solid study routine that includes practicing all components. Okay, so make sure to write from the beginning, your shopping lists, text your husband if he's Portuguese, or your wife, olá, bom dia, practice. So those words start coming naturally to you. Okay. Here are just some ideas of articles and newspapers you can, they also have apps. You can download the apps and get those alerts. I always have those alerts popping up on my phone on what's happening in Portugal. So, read articles, shows in Portuguese. Nowadays, we're very privileged. We have Portuguese shows on Netflix that we can watch with subtitles in Portuguese or English. So be creative in your study. And then, of course, if you want to learn more about the topics that are covered, like transportation, renting a room, pharmacies, you have a bunch of stores here and things that you can, learn vocabulary visiting these websites as well. And so when is a student ready? That's the big question. Traditionally, in a classroom, they say to be A2 level, you need 150 hours of study, of classes. The truth is, from my experience with a tutor, we can do it in half the time. So something between 75 and 100 hours is usually sufficient. But that, again, this all depends on where you are. If you already speak Portuguese, if you already know some Portuguese, if you spoke to your grandparents in Portuguese, it's much less. I've had students take 15 hours of lessons and they pass the CPLE. So it really depends. We meet you where you are. So again, you need to be comfortable using this A2 level vocabulary, and you've taken all your exams. You time yourself when you're doing those mock tests and you're like, I'm ready. I want to do it. If for any reason you don't pass the CPLE, don't panic. You can always retake it. The issue is sometimes the timing, right? That's if you're taking it in the US. Because if you, for example, try to do May, you got your spot in May and you didn't pass and you don't have spots in November, you have to wait a whole year. Or you can go to Portugal and just do a nice trip. Okay, and here is just a little bit of our services very quickly. Feel free to reach out if you would like to have a free consultation. I always meet, not in person, but online via Zoom with all my students. And I have a team of teachers in Portugal supporting me because I am currently not taking new students. And just this year, we've helped over 50 students take the CPLE. So we focus on one-on-one lessons, and then we also started some group projects to help students, for example, the conversational classes to help students prepare and do CPLE prep of those role plays. And we're going to start writing workshops soon. And finally, this weekend, I'm hoping, or Monday, this is my course that I'll be launching very soon, which I call the Ultimate A2 CPLE Exam Prep Course. I've been working on this for over a year. So it's a self-paced course, video recorded. I will not be teaching, this is very important, A2, it's not A2 curriculum that I'll be teaching. It's just the ins and outs of the exam. And then I'll be breaking down the exam, each question, and then I'll give you extra exercises for you to practice and see how you go. So it's all about really CPLE prep. And I'll give a 10% discount to anybody interested in the course. So just feel free to email me, Sandra at learneuropeanportugueseonline.com. And that's it. Thank you. Obrigada.
Awesome. That was like such thorough, great information, Sandra. Thank you so much. We do have a question here. What is your opinion of language apps such as Duolingo?
If you like apps, I think apps are a great complement. I wouldn't recommend, and I don't want to get too in detail of European Portuguese versus Brazilian Portuguese, but if you are a total beginner and you are going to take the CPLE, which, all the audios are going to be in, European Portuguese, I don't recommend using Duolingo because it's all in Brazilian Portuguese. And now we do have a few apps. We're quite fortunate that do have the European Portuguese option. So you can download Memrise or Drops, and those are European Portuguese.
So is that actually something, though, that makes a difference when you're taking the test? So, for example, if you have a stronger Brazilian pronunciation versus the European, are you marked down for that? Or if you use, let's say you're writing your postcard and you use Brazilian slang versus the colloquial terminology that's in Portugal?
That is a great question. And I only found out the answer for that recently because I had a student reach out to me that he learned Brazilian Portuguese and I had to ask Capu. So you can, the reading comprehension, by the way, is all multiple choice questions. And the same with the listening. So it's all multiple choice. So that won't affect if you study Portuguese, technically you're not, but the writing or the speaking, you can speak and use if you speak Brazilian Portuguese, that's totally fine. That's accepted. What they say is you can't mix both variants. So if you learn Brazilian Portuguese, you can do the whole exam speaking in Brazilian Portuguese, but you can't mix it with European Portuguese. So you have to be thorough and not mixing them. That's the response we got. Yes.
Okay, so then that makes me think of Portuguese, right? So if someone from here is like, oh, I'm fluent in Portuguese, right? But they say estou instead of loja, that's not going to count.
Well, yes. In that case, STOA, I mean, because again, these tests are all analyzed,
Mhm.
in Portugal. And the truth is, I've done a video about the word STOA. Nobody in Portugal knows what a
Knows what that
STOA
is,
is.
right? Uh-huh. Right. I mean, it's a good thing, right? Because I think we have a lot of people in the community. They're like, yeah, I mean, I've been speaking Portuguese my whole life, but they say, like I said, more parquear o carro instead of estacionar, right?
Exatamente.
No, this was great. And so I'll just, again, a plug for PALCUS is that not only is being a member can help you, with your either the spouse membership, but as a member, you're going to get access to these coming conversation groups that we're going to have that are just for practicing our Portuguese. They're going to be available to members only. So if you are, know that you're going to have to study for the CPLE program, you can become a member of PALCUS and then practice what you have been learning with Sandra in our discussion groups. So another plug for there. I don't think we have any other questions about the language itself or the language test itself. So I think
can I just add something actually that I forgot that I think is very important because a lot of students that reach out to me are, elderly, and like Nelson was mentioning, they're the last connection. They're the last ones that can give citizenship to their sons and grandsons. And they're under a lot of pressure to take this language test, right? And it's not easy to be in your 70s or 80s and learn a language, right? So I do have cases of that. So I just wanted to mention it's a longer process if you're older, of course. But also if you have any kind of, listening impairment, vision impairment, or any, they do special accommodations. Okay. So
that's good to know.
Yeah, we have a student recently that couldn't hear very well. And she didn't do the listening part of the exam. And she passed actually. So, because it's one of the hardest parts and it's also the one that's worth 40%. So they do special accommodations. So you can always reach out to CAPL directly and ask. They might ask you for like a medical note or something, but they do special accommodations.
Can I just ask a question quickly too, since Sandra, your presentation was amazing. I even took notes for myself because it was great. I know previously, if you were taking the Portuguese language exam and you were over a certain age, you didn't have to do the full thing. That is not true as of this year, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, we just got that question that came in. So someone said, in discussing with a Portuguese immigration lawyer in becoming a citizen through grandparents, if you're over the age of 68 years old, that the language exam is not required. But that's not the case, is what you're saying.
Not the case, no.
Okay.
There were, how can I say this? There were some misinformation this year where people over the age of 65 only had to do the speaking part. But then when CAPL sent out an email saying that's not true. The only situation where you only do the speaking part is if you do not know how to write or read. So.
Oh, okay. So like if you never learned how to read or write.
Yes, that's the only case. Yes. Otherwise you have to do the full exam, or if you have, any, physical issue that you can prove. So yeah.
And there is currently no situation where the test would be waived entirely.
No, entirely no. Not that I'm aware of. There would just be the speaking part, which, if you grew up in a Portuguese community and, you just have, they ask you, como se chama, what's your name, where do you live, onde mora? So it's, from my experience with all my students, I've never had a student not pass the speaking part. I know it's the scariest for some, but usually students always pass the speaking part. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, that was amazing. We're getting a lot of questions about, is this going to be recorded? Can we get a copy of the presentation? And so, yes, these are all being recorded. We will make them available online. So no worries there. But thank you so much, Sandra. That was awesome.
Obrigada.
So again, for those who asked about contacting our folks on the webinar today, if you actually go to the PALCUS website and go up to the top, resources, consular, you will actually see that they are listed here. We're still adding Nelson's information here. Website updates tend to be a little slow, but again, we will send out information to contact him as well. We also have some of the Q&As that we do on these webinars. We've actually written them out on our website, and so the ones from today will be added eventually. So you can always go find them there. And then, as we talked about before, that being a PALCUS member can actually really help your citizenship process. So if you're looking to take the CPLE test, you can practice your Portuguese during our language conversation groups. And if you are applying through a spouse, you can use our membership as a way to show connection to the community. And there's just some other benefits to being a member. And very easy. You go to our website, click on Become a Member, and signing up takes 5 minutes, and membership starts at $50 for the year, so quite affordable. There you go. And with that, say obrigada. For me, obrigada. So thank you so much to our panelists. It's like such great information. I think things that we haven't really covered in detail in the past, that we get lots of questions for. I know this is not going to be the last webinar that we have. So thank you all so much for your time. Really, really valuable. And thank you to all those who joined us either on Zoom or on Facebook. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us, reach out to our panelists, and good luck with your citizenship process application. Just stick with it. Eventually it will happen. And with that, we'll say have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks so much. Obrigada.